And welcome back to another episode of the Reid Option Podcast. I have the whole gang back with me today. I'm always excited when I have my two partners in crime. Even though you guys are on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast, we have a little West Coast versus East Coast thing going here. But I'm happy to have you guys back. Dre Harris is back, of course, in his usual Monday spot. And Brentley is joining me once again, as he always does. Gentlemen, how you guys doing?
I'm doing well, man. Enjoying this rain out here in Phoenix for a few days. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, doing well. Likewise, and Dre, I was meaning to talk to you about that. I heard there's some pretty crazy thunderstorms going out in the Phoenix area. Man, gotta stay safe out there.
I mean, it's not that bad. If you've lived in the northwest region of the country, man, it is nothing along those lines. I mean, but when you're not used to rain, when you're used to 300 days of sun, I mean, people don't know how to react, man, as soon as it starts drizzling a little bit.
Yeah, I can imagine, man.
Everybody that lives in Seattle, they say it rains 300 days out of the 365 that they live there throughout the year. I've never been to Seattle before, but I've never heard any good reviews about it. It's just a gloomy place.
Seattle's one of the most beautiful cities, man.
Seattle's a gorgeous city.
Yeah, the rain it sucks, and it's true, Jordan. Like, it rains at least 300 days out of the year, but when you do get a sunny day, it is nothing else like it. It is beautiful. I highly recommend you taking a trip up there.
It is a great place, man. In fact, it's one of my favorite stadiums is in UW. I have one of my most memorable moments in college at UW. I got picked against Tuiasosopo. It was a one-handed pick. Yep, Marcus Tuiasosopo. And their field is like backs up to a lake. So I mean, it's crazy. Seattle's beautiful though.
And ironically enough, we'll be talking about maybe not the city of Seattle. We'll be talking about Washington today, though. In our tight ends preview, we've already been through our summer scouting series, quarterbacks, running backs, and we're touching on tight ends today. And, just a little rundown of the show. The three tight ends that we will be continuing our summer scouting with is Jahleel Billingsley from Alabama. We'll touch on Jalen Wydermyer from Texas A&M, and then we'll finish up with Cade Otton from Washington. But before we get to that, it was a busy week in the NFL this week, guys, and there's been a ton that's going on. We found out that Chandler Jones actually requested a trade from Arizona, which was quietly swept under the rug. But the biggest news of the day is Deshaun Watson reporting to training camp, and then the Green Bay Packers. They're going through a lot right now with two of their biggest offensive weapons in Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams. With their contract situations going on and everything that's going up there in Green Bay, there seems to be a lot of panic that's going on right now. I'm sure you guys have seen the retirement talk with Aaron Rodgers of how he could pull a Carson Palmer of when he was traded to the Oakland Raiders, I believe it was back then, when he pulled that retirement stunt with that. So the Packers, man, like, it just seems like everything has been downhill for them on a personnel side ever since the Jordan Love draft, when Aaron Rodgers wasn't coming off a good season. And they kind of were just like they always do. They did it with Brett Favre. They've done it with plenty of other players, and not necessarily just at quarterback, but that's just how they do. That's how they've always been. That's how their tree works, even going all the way back to the Ron Wolf days. And they pretty much prepare for the worst with guys if they're not able to pay them. We saw it with Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, and now we saw it with Jordan Love and Aaron Rodgers as well. And it just seems like Aaron Rodgers just hasn't really recovered from them drafting Jordan Love. And what I mean by that is the relationship has just been fractured. We know he's been an absolute stud on the field, winning the MVP last year and everything that he's done to this point. But if you're in Brian Gutekunst's shoes, like, how are you handling this situation? And Brentley, I'll start with you. Just what's your overall thoughts on the Rodgers situation and then Davante Adams thing that's going on right now?
I guess first and foremost, from Gutekunst, I highly regret drafting Jordan Love, but can't go back in the past. So all you can do is kind of worry about your future. And I'm not sure if the relationship between Gutekunst and Rodgers is fixable or solvable. To me, it looks like this is heading for a divorce, whether that's in a month, whether that's a year from now. I don't think that they're going to be – I don't think Rodgers is finishing career as a Packer. And, I saw on Instagram with the Jordan Pippen, like, synchronized pictures that Adams and Rodgers both posted, and all the kind of cryptic messaging coming out of Green Bay. It's like something's going on up there. I think there's a lot more to the story that anyone knows. I know Devontae Adams, the reports where he was looking for a new contract this offseason, and like every single offer the Packers gave him, not one of the offers made him the number one paid receiver in the NFL. That's ridiculous. Like, one, he probably is the best receiver in the NFL in terms of talent and on-field production, like last year. But even if he wasn't, like that's just the name of the game, right? Like, he's the latest contract, so you would expect him to get the highest paid. Like, not to mention that he deserves it. So if I'm Devontae Adams, I take that as a direct, like, F you. If I'm Adams, like, how the hell are you not going to pay me like the number one receiver in the league, which I am, And so I think it's a bold strategy, what Gutekunst is doing, really trying to just really irritate and make the two best players on his team, frustrated. Like, that's not a recipe for success. He's putting himself out there, but I think at the end of the day, like, it's going to backfire on him. I'm not sure what the solution is going to be here. I mean, my take from the Last Dance pictures is, hey, this is our last year. Like, let's just go out and, like, we're going to report to camp. We'll play this year out, try to win a Super Bowl, and then it's like, peace. Like, we're out. Like, that's my take of that picture. In regards to the retirement talks, God, I'd be shocked. I'd be absolutely floored. That'd be a very, very sad day for the NFL. If Rodgers actually did retire, but I think ultimately the Packers are just going to call his bluff and see what he does.
So I was going to say this, and I was going to add this. Just reading a little bit more into it, and I'm just opening up the floor for either one of you guys to answer this. The reason that they said they were a little bit reluctant to pay Devontae Adams is that he turns 29 in December, which means he's a bit of an older player. And, receiver's kind of one of those positions that's kind of hard to determine when guys really hit that wall, but it usually happens in their early 30s. So would that make you a little bit hesitant to pay Devontae Adams just because he's entering age 29 in December? I'm going to come to you, Dre. What do you think of the situation? And then would you be hesitant to pay Devontae Adams even though he's turning 29 in December?
So I personally think the situation is unfortunate all the way around. I mean, if you're the front office and you want to get into a pissing contest with two very integral pieces of your franchise, I mean, I don't necessarily think that would be a wise move. This, at the end of the day, is still a players' league. And I feel like, and I said this the other day during our meetings, it's about more than just signing Devontae in terms of what message are you sending to the rest of the team with somebody who's performed like Aaron, somebody who's performed like Tay, right? Those two guys are two of the best, two top-tier players in their respective positions in the league. If you don't sign those guys, you're sending a message to the rest of the team, just like you not re-signing Aaron is sending a message to Tay, right? And so I think that trust is a huge thing, man. Trust and credit, they're easy to break and they're hard to get back, man. And I think that the trust between their prominent players, in particular Tay Adams and Aaron, has been broken. And I think that it will ultimately be time to move on. But at the end of the day, too, I think the Green Bay, the franchise is spoiled. I mean, if you think they had Brett Favre, right, and they were spoiled with Brett Favre for all those years, and they've got Aaron, I think they don't really understand how difficult it is to get generational talent at the position through the draft, because they've had two of the best for a very long time. I mean, but it's an unfortunate deal, but at the end of the day, it's a players' league, man. Don't forget it.
Absolutely. So here's my sneaky suspicion. Oh, it's not even sneaky, honestly. I think Aaron Rodgers is seeing what's happening in Tampa Bay with Tom Brady and how they really went all in on him, trading for Gronk, getting Antonio Brown, a player that he's been an advocate for, and then some of the other moves that they made, bringing in Leonard Fournette, who was a really good pickup for them. And then he looks at the roster and then all of the requests that he's made for Green Bay. he's like, why can't y'all do this for me? You saw the results with Tom. Now, why can't y'all do this for me? Why can't y'all trade for a Julio Jones, even though I don't think the Falcons would have traded him to Green Bay just because they're both in the NFC. But you don't even try to get an upgrade. You don't draft a receiver in the first round. And then not only that, you go out and draft my eventual, what was quote unquote my replacement as well. So like, just imagine if they would have drafted somebody like a T Higgins instead of Jordan Love. I think something like that would have made Aaron so much more happier than drafting an A.J. Dillon, who's still not going to get a lot of reps just because Aaron Jones is there. Little things like that, I think that's really rubbed Aaron the wrong way.
Right. And I think that if we think back, I mean, Aaron had been asking for a prominent wide receiver for a long time, about 3 years prior to him requesting a trade, if not more. I mean, so I think the Green Bay has done him a disservice. They've rested on their laurels for so long, and they've had a great player, right? Someone who's absolutely going to Canton, first ballot. And so I think that it's kind of caused them to kind of get a little bit arrogant, especially in terms of the draft. And I think it's going to come back to haunt them in the long run.
For sure. I'm 110% there with you on that, and how they got really comfortable with Aaron Rodgers just because he hides so many warts on that roster. They've never really been strong outside of Devontae Adams at receiver. And then there's been some other areas of where they haven't been very good at defensively, of where Aaron's just able to help you overcome that. And we know they've been to the NFC Championship game multiple times during his career there. And I just think they've gotten so spoiled with how great he has been, of where they've been lacking with roster building as well. And we've seen that in years past with plenty of other great quarterbacks as well. I think it happened with Peyton Manning early on in his career, of where he was just able to hide so many warts, of where their roster building wasn't super great. But eventually they got those things turned around there, and he ended up winning the Super Bowl. And then everybody knows what happened with him in Denver as well. And I think Denver is probably the most logical destination for Aaron Rodgers as well. I don't really see any other destination that makes a whole bunch of sense for him right now outside of Denver. So, but moving on, the next thing that I want to get to NFL related is the Deshaun Watson situation. And I think this is one of the most important things of the offseason as far as to pay attention to, just because I think it's going to be really awkward with him reporting to training camp, which means he's there. I don't know if they're going to make him available to the media. Everybody knows what he has done, the allegations that's come up with him, and the things that's going on with his situation. But it's been kind of quiet over the past month or so. And today was really the first time that we've really heard his name over the past 50 to 60 days. But I just think it's going to be a really, really awkward situation as far as him being there. And I'm really interested to see how David Culley, the head coach there, really addresses the situation, just because, I mean, nobody's going to ask any other questions about what's going on at the Texas training camp. Nobody really cares, honestly, just because everybody knows that Deshaun Watson is the star player there, and all the news surrounding that franchise has been about him all offseason. Nobody cares about any draft picks just because there's not a whole bunch of talent on the roster right now. Everything is centered around Deshaun Watson. So if you were David Culley, like, what would you do about this situation? And Dre, I'll come to you first.
I think it's first of all, the Deshaun reporting to Cap is just a formality. He won't be doing anything. He'll have a hamstring or something. He'll be sitting on the sideline the whole time. He won't be doing anything. And just from the things that I know about Nick and the place he comes from and the thing they're trying to build within the culture and with Jack there and guys who I know in that front office, I don't think there's any way under any circumstances that Deshaun Watson is putting that forward on ever again, right? I think it's a formality at this point that he shows up to avoid that $50,000 a day fine, right?
Not an idiot.
I think that he'll create as much of a distraction as possible, so that they'll eventually have his hand forced, and they'll have to trade him. And I think that that's how it'll end up.
Brinley, what about you? What do you think about the situation, and then what do you think is the end result?
I think the situation is fascinating because, as you mentioned, like, for the entire early part of the offseason, Deshaun Watson was the story. Like, whether it was him requesting the trade and, which teams might trade for him, to all of a sudden the allegations started coming out and what's real, what's not, like, is he still even tradable? Like, and then all of a sudden, I feel like once the 49ers traded for, the number 3 pick, Deshaun Watson's name just fell out the media. Like, no, we stopped hearing about him. It just kind of went ghost, quiet. And I just felt like at this point, there would have been more news, more substance in terms of like the case. Because right now we're nowhere closer to a resolution than we were back in April. And, I just don't think that this can drag on much further in terms of Goodell needs to put him on the list right now. Like, why is he not on the commissioner's exempt list yet? Because theoretically, as right now, Deshaun Watson could play. Like, I know, Dre, you mentioned that he'll probably be out with a hamstring, or they'll put him on some sort of list, and I agree with you. But I'm just saying, like, as of right now, what's stopping from number 4 from playing? Like, he's not on the list yet, and I just think that needs to happen. In my opinion, before the start of camp. So, like, by tomorrow, I believe. Just so that way, like, the Texans can go into their training camp with an understanding that, hey, Deshaun Watson really ain't going to be here. Like, it's Tyrod Taylor's show. We got to start, building a game plan around Tyrod Taylor. But if I'm Nick Caserio, if I'm David Culley, like, I do not want number 4 going to the press conferences. It just can't become a bigger distraction than it already is, especially if he's not going to play. Like, me, if I'm Nick Caserio, I don't want Watson to come to my camp, and we just won't find him. Like, he's better off training in Atlanta and doing his thing, and letting his legal issues resolve themselves. Hey, no worries, we're not going to find you, but like, you're more of a disservice being here, because now reporters are going to be everywhere asking all the questions and really taking away the spotlight from what's really important, and that's the product on the field. So I guess kind of where I'm coming from is I just want, some sort of progression in all of this, because I feel like we haven't got anything since really April, or even earlier, like even March.
Yeah, so what I thought was really interesting, and Schefter tweeted this out when he said he was reporting to camp, and he said the reason that he's not on the commissioner exempt list is because they don't have probable cause, which is really interesting just because he hasn't been charged with anything court-wise. So I think, they don't have cause, so you can't put him on the commissioner exempt list, which makes sense. But I think it's going to be messy, man. Like, if he goes out there on that practice field, which I don't see happening, he's probably going to be hiding in the training room or something like that. But it's going to be really, really interesting. But I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with it for sure. I just think his value is so low right now. I don't see anybody trading for him, just because you don't know how long he's going to be suspended or what's going to happen with the situation. Is he going to go to jail? You don't really know what's going to happen with that right now. So let's go ahead and get to this summer scouting. We have some really talented tight ends that we're going to get to today. A couple of SEC guys, one Pac-12 guy. Brentley, I know you did Cade Otton. I did the other 2 as far as area scouts, and Jalen Wydermyer, and then Jahleel Billingsley. Dre, I know you've touched on both of them in our scouting meeting, but I want to start with Cade Otton, and I want to come to you, Brentley, just because I was really impressed with him on film. He has a lot of likable traits as far as from a physical standpoint. Of course, just like any other prospect, he does have some weaknesses that he does need to work on. Going to be a redshirt senior this year, so this is going to be it for him, depending on if he wants to exhaust his extra year for COVID or not. But I was really impressed with Cade Otton, but I'll go ahead and let you touch on him.
Yeah, I came away really, really impressed as well. I think he's a really good all-around tight end. I think he has good size, really good athlete, just smooth, fluid. I think the thing that really stands out to me about him is, he's so nuanced as a route runner for a tight end. You see him, work leverage at the stem, and really able to attack defenders and put them in a bad spot. I think his suddenness at the top of the route is really impressive to me. He consistently gets open. He's outstanding hands and ball skills and body control for a big guy. He's just a really good, just overall receiving tight end. And then I think he's a competitor in the run game. He works to the whistle, plays with really good leverage. I don't think he's just the strongest guy at the point of attack, but I think he has really good technique to get position. He's more of a seal wall off kind of guy than an actual, power inline blocker, in my opinion. But he's more than serviceable. I mean, he's absolutely more than serviceable in the run game. So when you look for a guy who, has the speed to stretch the seam and can run all the routes, outstanding hands and ball skills, like he's exactly what you want in today's NFL tight end, in my opinion. And, I don't think he's the most dynamic in terms of ball, running as a receiver in the open field and after the catch and things like that. But this kid, he has everything you want, in my opinion. I'm a big fan of his. I think, he's a guy who can come in day one and produce at the next level. So, I think he's one of the top players in this draft at his position.
Yeah, so a couple of notes I had down about him. I said route deception and creativity. He's very crafty. Mm-hmm. He understands how to attack and win. Versus leverage, really good at sitting in the soft spots. Versus zone and can win. Versus man coverage. Some definite pluses that I gave to him. I said he's an extremely high-level competitor after the catch and tries to gain as many yards as possible. But one of the most impressive things about him is that he ran 88 routes last year. He only had 18 catches on 20 targets, no drops. But 110 of his 258 yards from last year came after the catch. 11 first downs on 18 catches. So that tells me that whenever it's crunch time, you need that reception and you need somebody to get you that first down. He's the guy that they come to. And I agree with everything that you said. I think you were spot on with him as a blocker. He's not going to be that, that butt kicker that's going to thrive on those single blocks and, manning up against those defensive ends. But he's really good when you get him up on those double teams. He can lead and have some momentum as a zone blocker. And he is a little bit thin in his lower half, and it really does show up as a blocker. But as far as zone blocking and then working up to the next level and sealing guys off on the backside if he has to, I think he's able to do that. Really strong hands. But one big negative, all his production came in 2 games last year. So he had 15 catches for 208 yards and 3 touchdowns against Utah and Arizona. Outside of that, he really didn't show up at all. So I'm hoping now with him being in that main role as far as the bona fide number 1 tight end, I'm hoping they target him a little bit more, and I think they will, just because I think he had like nearly 330 yards in 2019, and then he had like 260 last year. So, with the bigger sample size, I'm really hoping that he can take the next step. But he definitely, when you talk about somebody with the arrow pointing up, which is a term that you use a lot when you're talking about your scouting reports, Brentley, which I love, this definitely is a player that I think is on the rise as far as somebody that's getting better every single year. But Dre, what'd you think of Cade Otton?
I thought that he'll be in the conversation for the most complete tight end in the entire draft. I thought that he was competitive and tough at the point of attack. I thought he was effective both in line of sheer determination and competitiveness, as well as flexed out in the task. I thought he had a very good feel for zones, and sitting in holes underneath. I thought he was a good hands catcher, and he does a very good job of catching the ball away from his frame. He's not really a dynamic route runner, in my opinion, and he's not really a problem. He doesn't really create problems against man coverage. He's just a guy that's solid in the aspect, but overall, from top to bottom, as far as being complete as a pass catcher and a run blocker, I think he'll be in the conversation for top 2 in the entire draft at tight end.
Did a pro comp come to mind for any of you guys when watching him?
It's kind of tough. I want to say Tyler Eifert, but I don't know if he's. Because Tyler Eifert was a dog before he got hurt. I don't know. Yeah. Anyone come for you?
No, it didn't. I didn't write anybody down immediately. But, whenever 87 is such a common tight end number, man, I thought he was kind of similar to Freiermuth last year. I think they have a similar body type. I think Freiermuth was a little bit better of a blocker, but I think Otton's a little bit more dynamic. But as far as some similarities, they had a lot of things in common as far as, not super hyper-level athletes, but very deceptive in coverage, very good finding the soft spots, really good in contested catch situations, and they really dominate over the middle of the field, and you can use them in different areas of the field too. So Frymuth was kind of similar. I really didn't find any comp that I loved, but I thought they had a lot of similarities as far as prospects. But let's go ahead and move on to our next guy, which will be Jalen Wydermyer from Texas A&M, who's getting a lot of first-round love right now, but I think he's really one of the more debatable prospects. And I think when you're talking about tight ends, similar to wide receiver or some of the other positions, it really just depends on what type of flavor that you like. Do you like more of your blocking types or receiving types, or do you like a combination of both? And I think Wydermyer, there's going to be a lot of discussions about him just because I think he has a very unique skill set. And what I mean by that is just the receiving aspect. It really is a little bit different from what we have seen a little bit in years past. He's not Kyle Pitts. He's not any of these other guys that we have seen in years past, just because they're more of your F-type tight ends. And we'll talk more about F tight ends versus Y tight ends when we get to our next guy, and Jahleel Billingsley. But just going through Wydermyer a little bit, 6'5", 265. He'll be a true junior this year. Some of my quick notes about him: he plays a different variety. He plays from a variety of platforms, and he's tasked with a lot of responsibilities. They treat him really like an F and a Y tight end. He gives them a lot of value in the passing game. Not a top-tier athlete. He's more of a long strider, not very sudden, but he understands how to lean on matchups and create those small hints of space in order to snag the ball out of the air. But the blocking area was the biggest area where I have questions about him. And what I wrote down is he kind of just camouflages. He just gets lost and hopes for the best. They really use him a lot as a puller in their counter game, and then they use him in line quite a bit as well. He does have a lot of finesse to his game as a blocker. And then just going over some quick stats about him, 53 of his 69 targets came over the middle of the field or in between the hashes. But the most fascinating stat I found out about him is that so he has 12 career touchdowns. 11 of them have come in the red zone. So he's dominant in the red zone. That's really where his area of expertise is. And you see that all over his film. They use him on those corner routes quite a bit. And then over the middle of the field against man coverage, of where he's able to sky over defenders as well. So he has a lot of likable traits. But once again, it just depends on what type of flavor that you like at the position. And he's going to win all the accolades at tight end at the position in the SEC. He's going to be first-team All-American. And once again, like I said, it really just depends on what you like at the position. But I do have some questions about his true athleticism and just his ability to consistently separate his man coverage. That's the big question mark I have about him. So, Dre, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think about Wydermyer?
I thought that he was someone who was a sufficient level athlete with prototypical NFL size. He's someone that it seems like they kind of play him more in a detached role because of his lack of prowess as a run blocker to be used as a traditional Y. Even though he has traditional Y size, he's someone you'd ideally want as a much better play side run blocker. I thought he had very good catch radius and can make the tough catch on off target throws. I thought he uses his size well in contested catch situations. I think the areas of concern for me, I thought he lacked a certain level of toughness and physicality. I would like to see him improve in that area for a guy with his size. He's not a great separator at the top of the route, nor does he play with explosive play speed. But I do think that someone will love the size and the catch radius and hope that you can coach more of a physical player out of him. So he certainly has tools to work with. He also has some holes in areas that he needs to improve going into the season.
Really good points. Yeah. And I agree with pretty much everything that you said there. Before I come to you, Brentley, the name that I wrote down was present day Jared Cook. I think he reminds me a lot of Jared Cook right now and how much of a security blanket he's been for Drew Brees during his time in New Orleans. And I believe he's with the Chargers now, and Herbert's going to use him a lot as well. I think that's going to be a really good fit for him there. So just trying to paint a picture for you guys that are listening of just the player that we're talking about. But Brentley, I'm going to come to you now. What do you think of the Texas A&M tight end?
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys hit it. I mean, the size really pops out when you watch him on tape. He's really long. I think he moves I think he moves decently, for a man his size. You see him open up his stride. And again, like you guys said, definitely not an explosive athlete, more of a built to speed type player who, takes some steps to open up his stride. But then once the stride is opening, he can gain ground on you because his legs are so dang long. Um, Outstanding ball skills, in my opinion, outstanding catch radius, above average hands. You do see some drops here and there in his film, so I think those are more concentration related. But those are in his game. Unfortunately, I think he's good after the catch. Again, not dynamic, not going to make a ton of guys miss, but he's so dang strong and physical, in my opinion, that with the ball in his hands, where he really makes it difficult to bring him down when he's running with the football. Jordan, I think I really appreciated that stat about I think we said 11 out of his 12 touchdowns are in the red zone. You see it, his size and length really does create mismatches in those tighter areas of the field. And I think that's going to make him really attractive when you're looking at him as an NFL prospect. One of the things that I kind of came away with is whereas Cade Otton plays more physical, he has better technique. At the end of the day, he doesn't have that prototypical, in my opinion, like size like Wydermyer has. And while I wish he showed more physicality, I wish I saw more consistency as an inline blocker. I at least know that he has the size and strength to be able to do it if we can get him to the right coach. So I think there's a level of upside here with this kid. I wish he was more exciting at the top of the routes. I don't think he's a crafty route runner at all, to be honest with you guys. I definitely think he wins by, him just quite frankly being the biggest, longest and having, massive catch radius. So I think, if he's a guy, if I can get with a really good tight end coach, I think we could see a really good player at the next level. But as you guys mentioned, there are some glaring holes and weaknesses to this kid's game. But I do think there's a level of upside here with this guy.
For sure. And once again, just like any other tight end, it really just depends on what type of flavor that you like. And I think, honestly, tight end is one of the harder positions to learn coming into the NFL, just because you're learning two positions at once. And what I mean by that is you're learning routes as a receiver. Even though you may be blessed as a route runner, you still have to learn exactly what you're doing. You're facing different types of play speeds with these defensive backs. You're facing bigger, faster, longer guys to an extent as well. But also you have to learn how to be a blocker as well. Certain teams expect you to play that inline role like a TJ Hawkinson. He's learning two positions at once. So he's gotten off to a bit of a slow start to his career. Initially, he's picked it up a little bit, but that's why we don't really see those dominant early seasons from tight ends. It's very rare to see that. So Wydermyer definitely is going to be one player that I'm looking forward to seeing how he performs this year, especially with Texas A&M having some question marks at quarterback. I think that's going to be something that he's going to have to overcome. But we know that offense is going to be really good if they're able to replace some of the production that they do have, especially up front along the offensive line. They're going to have 4 new starters up there, along with Kenyon Green, who we'll get to a little bit later in our summer scouting series. But we'll stay in the SDC, and we'll go to Jahleel Billingsley, who is the tight end at Alabama, a player that I'm a big fan of. He's actually my favorite of the tight end group this year. But once again, it just depends on what type of tight end that you like. He's more of your F tight end as opposed to a Y. And for those of you that may have some questions as far as what is the differentiation between the two, your F is more of your wide receiver type of where he plays detached and you involve him a lot in the passing game. And he may from time to time be attached to the hip of the tight end, attached to the hip of the offensive tackle, and you use them sparingly as a blocker. But predominantly, most of their production is going to be suited in the passing game as opposed to a Y, which is going to be more of your mixture of both. They do a little bit more of the dirty work in the run game as well. So when we're talking about Billingsley, he's more of your F type of tight end. And the first thing that I wrote down, he's built like a Z wide receiver at 6'3", just right at 230 pounds. You really would mistake him as a wide receiver if you really didn't see the TE beside his name on the depth chart. And the first thing that stands out about him is just his athleticism. He's a fluid mover, and he plays the game like a wide receiver. I do have some questions about him in the run game as far as a blocker. That's really not where his value is going to come. He had a really nice block against Mississippi State of where he took a defensive back and shoved him to the sideline. I was really impressed with that. So the physical nature is in him, but I just don't think his body has caught up to what he wants to do, if that makes sense as far as a run blocker. He's really, really thin right now, and I'm really hoping he can put on some weight, which I think will come over time. He's very heavily involved in those pre-snap motions, trying to create some advantageous situations in the run game as well. And then they'll slip him out of the backfield as well, and some of those underneath routes on some play action or some bootlegs as well. But had 287 yards last year, but most of his production has come what is called a pylon concept. So basically all it is a glorified over route, and he's just running as fast as he can to the opposite hash. I think he had a big catch against Notre Dame in the college football playoff, or where he's running that over concept, just to paint a picture for you guys of really what they've asked him to do in that offense. So I think strength is one area of where he needs to improve, diversifying his route tree, which I think will come this year just because they have to replace Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, and some other receivers that they had in that system that they lost. So he's essentially going to be their number 2 or 3 wide receiver behind John Mechie III. And then also with that, I think this once again is a player that has the arrow pointing up. And I'll go ahead and say it, the comp that I put out there for him is Gerald Everett. He reminds me a lot as far as from a body type standpoint, and then just the utilization with him. So, Brentley, I'll come to you first. I'll come back to you. What did you think of Billingsley?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it. Like, he's essentially a bigger receiver, right? I mean, he's not going to be your traditional inline tight end. That's never going to be his game. And really, I think he'd be misused in that role. I think what he can do as a pass catcher, his ability as a receiver, really good athlete, sudden at the top of his breaks, super smooth, outstanding hands and body control. I mean, you see him pluck the ball out of the air. He's a receiver. He's very, very natural. He's a really good overall athlete. I think he's outstanding speed. Jordan actually wrote that down too. I noticed that they were running him on the over route time and time again because, who's running with that man down the field like that? If you don't have a unicorn as strong safety or something, like it's a mismatch. And that's where I think a team with a creative offensive coordinator who understands and has a vision of how to best use this kid would make a lot of sense. But like if I'm an offensive coordinator that doesn't utilize a lot of 12 personnel, that doesn't have like an F tight end with that you can pair with an already in place traditional Y tight end, I don't know if Billingsley is going to be my cup of tea, to be quite honest with you guys. And so, I think this is a kid who'll have to go to a specific system with a specific coach to succeed, because we've seen players like this come into the league and fail. And then like as attractive as this kid's tape is and how tantalizing his skill set is as a receiver, like there is some risk with this kid because you just don't know how he will actually translate, because you don't know, unless you run a specific system, if he's going to fit, playing as a traditional tight end at the next level.
For sure, and I'm really glad you mentioned that last point, just because we've seen athletic tight ends come into the league and really not turn out as many would hope them to come to fruition. Like Evan Ingram is a great example, and there's been some other guys that have been the athletic type that really hasn't panned out. But I think the biggest reason why players like that don't work out is just because they expect them to be, a traditional Y tight end, and they treat them as such. As a player like a Billingsley, I think he has to feed off of a true Y tight end and be treated like that number 2 guy, as opposed to one that can satisfy that tight end one role. So like you said, I think landing spot is going to be huge for Billingsley. So I think he has to feed off of a true traditional Y tight end one. So Dre, I'm gonna come to you. What do you think of Billingsley?
And I thought he was an excellent athlete. He may be the most versatile and dynamic tight end in the class. Dynamic athlete who easily separates against man coverage. Hands catcher. Who shows some toughness, not necessarily effective, but someone who was willing to stick his nose in there as a run blocker. He is a bit underbulked, and he will most likely have to play an H or F role as the move guy in a particular offense. But most offenses have a guy who is their designated move guy in the offense. So I can see him playing in essentially any offense in the National Football League. And if you think about it, offensive coordinators these days are so good And the best ones find a way to put their best athletes in the best positions to have success. And they kind of can adjust their scheme and adjust their offense to fit the skill set of the prominent players that they have. So I think you have to put faith in coordinators to be able to do that. And I think that with the passing game being as wide open as it is in the National Football League now, this is someone who can certainly add value if picked in the right place. So
for sure, like if I was a team with a young quarterback and I had an early second round pick, I would be all over this dude. Like New York Jets would be a great fit for him with Sam Darnold in that LaFleur system.
Yeah.
With Joe Brady in Carolina with Sam Darnold, I think that'd be a great fit for him as well. Even though they took Trimble last year later on in the draft, I think pairing it with somebody like a Tommy Trimble, I think would be outstanding. And there's plenty of other areas I think he could excel as well. I think Jacksonville would be a great spot for him. So really anywhere with somebody that has tight end question marks, or they need somebody near the top of the depth chart that can thrive with the creative offensive mind as well. So I like Billingsley a lot, though. He's one of the more intriguing players that I think is going to have a lot of split opinions. Once again, just depends on what type of flavor that you want at the position. But that is our summer scouting series with tight ends. But Brentley, while it is on my mind, you remember our homework from last episode, right?
Dude.
Did you watch Jahmyr Gibbs from Georgia Tech?
Wow. I mean, holy hell. You don't see backs like that very often, man.
I told you, man.
I was struggling with the comparison, like low-key Jamar Charles, but like this kid is actually a weapon as a receiver. Like he thrives as a receiver. I mean, my God, I couldn't find a single hole in this guy's game. And like the fact that he returns kicks, that size, that explosiveness, that long speed. And then he's a gamer, you know, like he's not just an athlete. You see the instincts, you see the just the natural fluidity of him reading blocks, and like because he's a rare as an athlete, but like his football instincts and awareness is top notch too. So, God, man, between him and Bijan Robinson, like, geez, those are two top 15 backs. Like that, like those are rare guys. Like that's awesome. I'm excited.
So, Dre, just to catch you up from last episode when you weren't here, we got a little bit ahead of ourselves, looking a little bit ahead, just like we always do as scouts. We started talking about the 2023 running back class, and I know you're familiar with the young back at Georgia. His name is escaping me right now. I think it's Milton is his last name.
Milton.
Kendall Milton. I think that's his name. I'm sure you're the area scout responsible for Georgia, so I'm sure he's popped off the tape plenty of times and watching him. And Brentley was talking about Bijan Robinson from Texas. And I said, have you seen the kid from Georgia Tech? And he said no. So I'm signing it to you now. Whenever you get a chance, just go watch him. His name is Jahmyr Gibbs. He's a 2023 kid, and we're already gushing over that 2023 running back class, man. Like, it's going to be how we talked about the offensive tackle class from 2020 when it was Wirfs and Wills and Thomas and Becton. It's going to be a class that's like that. So not to get too far ahead, but, man, like the running back class next year is unbelievable.
Yeah, I would definitely go and check him out at some point here.
For sure. But that is our episode. Thank you guys once again for hanging in there with us. We went through our summer scouting series where we talked about Cade Otton from Washington, Jahleel Billingsley from Alabama, and also Jalen Wydermyer from Texas A&M. Next episode, we're going to go ahead and get into wide receivers. We got to fast forward this thing a little bit just because we actually have teams practicing on a football field in front of fans in training camp. The Steelers and Cowboys are already practicing in anticipation for the Hall of Fame game, I believe, is on August 5th. So it really is right around the corner. So we're going to go ahead and go to wide receivers. And next show, we're going to debate Chris Olave, Treylon Burks, Garrett Wilson, and we're going to add a fourth guy in there in George Pickens. Dre, we'll get your thoughts on George Pickens when you return with us next week, but we're going to briefly touch on him. But the other three we will give a full assessment on as well. And I haven't told you guys, we're going to eventually start our division by division preview. So I'm going to hold you guys accountable for the records that you give these teams and your predictions that you give these teams as well, just so I can run the tape back and I can evaluate you just to see how good or bad your predictions were a year from now when we're talking about seasons in. We have a 17-game season now, which is so weird to say now. We're going to get some weird records like 10-7. I'm not used to saying that now. I'm so used to saying 10-6, 8-8, 9-7. I got to get used to saying these other records like 9-8 and 10-7 and all these others. I haven't even got used to that yet. But once again, thank you guys for listening. Brentley Wiseman, Dre Harris, Jordan Reid, signing off for another episode of the Reid Option Podcast. Make sure to subscribe, leave a 5-star review. We will be back on Friday, continue our summer scouting series with wide receivers. And then we may throw you guys for a little bit of a twist with some added topics just because the NFL, you never know. There's always something that does come up. So thank you guys for listening. We will be back on Friday.